He divorced me for being poor, unaware I had just inherited $750 million. After decades of sacrifice, the man I trusted threw me away like nothing just to chase another woman's wealth. But the moment he walked out, my entire world turned upside down. A secret inheritance, a shocking return, and the battle for more than just money is about dignity, faith, and the courage to rise again. Whispers, betrayals, and the town watching every move. Will generosity heal her scars, or will greed drag her back into the nightmare she escaped? And when the man who broke her comes begging at her door, what will she choose? Revenge or redemption? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning light spilled through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes that danced in the air. Ellie Whitfield swayed gently to a hymn that had been stuck in her head since Sunday service as she measured coffee grounds into the filter. The familiar scent comforted her as she pressed the brew button and reached for 2 mugs from the cabinet. 40 years of marriage had established certain rhythms. Richard would be down soon, grumpy until he had his first cup, then gradually warming as the caffeine took effect. She learned to wait until his second cup before bringing up anything important. Lord, give me patience today, she whispered, a habit formed through decades of small prayers that carried her through each day. The floorboards creaked overhead. Richard was up. Ellie smiled and pulled the butter from the refrigerator for toast. The coffee maker gurgled its final notes as heavy footsteps descended the stairs. Richard appeared in the doorway. His face looked different, somehow tight around the mouth, eyes not meeting hers. He clutched a manila envelope against his chest like a shield. Morning, Ellie said, pouring the fresh coffee. Sleep well? Richard didn't answer. He pulled out a chair at their small kitchen table, the legs scraping against linoleum. He placed the envelope on the table, his fingers lingering on it. We need to talk. Something in his voice made Ellie's hand tremble. She set his mug down carefully and took her usual seat across from him. What is it? Is something wrong? Richard finally looked at her, his eyes cold in a way she'd never seen before. This isn't working anymore, Ellie. What isn't? She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. The coffee maker? I know it's old, but us. The word fell between them like a stone. This marriage, this life. Ellie's chest tightened. Richard, if you're upset about something, we can talk about it. We always have. I've been talking for years. You just haven't been listening. He pushed the envelope toward her. I'm done. With trembling fingers, Ellie opened the envelope. Legal language swam before her eyes, but certain phrases stood out in terrible clarity. Petition for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. Dissolution of marriage. I don't understand. Her voice sounded small, even to her own ears. After 40 years? Richard, whatever's wrong, we can fix it. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Fix what? The fact that I'm 65 and still driving a car that breaks down weekly? That we can't afford to travel? That I've spent my entire life pinching pennies while watching everyone else enjoy themselves? We've had a good life, Ellie whispered. We've had each other. A good life? Working myself to the bone for what? To retire in this. He gestured around the kitchen, at the worn countertops and outdated appliances. This mediocrity. Is this about money? Because we have enough for it. Enough? Richard stood suddenly, his chair tipping backward. I'm done with enough. I'm done with being poor. I'm done with you holding me back. The words struck Ellie like physical blows. The coffee mug warmed her palms, but a cold sensation spread through her body. I've found someone who understands ambition, who has the means to enjoy life. Ellie stared at the divorce papers, unable to process his words. Don't bother calling me. My lawyer will be in touch about the house. Richard turned and stormed out, the front door slamming with such force that the kitchen windows rattled. Ellie sat frozen, coffee growing cold in her hands, the morning sun now seeming to mock the darkness that had just swallowed her world. The kitchen had grown dim as afternoon faded into evening. Ellie hadn't moved from her chair, the divorce papers still spread before her, coffee long, cold, and untouched. The clock ticked away hours that felt both endless and meaningless. Memories washed over her like waves, each one carrying a different shade of sacrifice. The early years of their marriage flashed through her mind, working double shifts at Memorial Hospital while pregnant with Jamie, their firstborn. Standing on swollen feet for 12 hours, coming home to cook dinner, only to find Richard frustrated about another sales commission that hadn't materialized. "You always did what was needed," she whispered to herself, fingertips tracing the grain of the wooden table they'd bought at the yard sale 35 years ago. She remembered skipping lunch for months to save for Richard's business suit when he interviewed for that management position. The pride in his eyes when he got it had been worth every hunger pang. Then came the failed investments, the restaurant venture that collapsed after 6 months, the timeshare scheme that drained their savings, the multi-level marketing program that left them with a garage full of unsold products. After each failure, Ellie had picked up extra shifts, sold her mother silver, canceled her dental appointments, all without complaint, all with a smile and reassurance. "We'll get through this together," she'd always told him. The children's college funds had somehow survived intact her one non-negotiable priority. She sewn prom dresses instead of buying them, repaired appliances instead of replacing them, grown vegetables to stretch their grocery budget. Sunset cast long shadows across the kitchen floor. Ellie finally stood, her joints stiff from sitting so long. Upstairs, drawers opened and closed. Richard was packing. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavy with the weight of her breaking heart. Their bedroom door stood ajar. Richard moved methodically between closet and suitcase, not looking up when she appeared in the doorway. "Was any of it real?" Her voice cracked. "Did you ever love me at all?" Richard paused, dress shirts folded in his hands. "That's not the point. It's exactly the point. We want different things, Ellie. Always have." He resumed packing, zipping one suitcase closed with finality. "I've spent my life trying to build something while you were content with this." His gesture encompassed their modest bedroom with its faded curtains and mismatched furniture. "I was content with us," she whispered. Richard hefted both suitcases. "Marissa has invited me to stay with her until things are settled." The name struck Ellie like a physical blow. Marissa Langford, the widow who lived in the stone mansion on Hillcrest Drive, the one who wore diamonds to church and hosted charity galas for causes she clearly didn't understand. "Marissa," Ellie repeated, the pieces suddenly falling into place. The late meetings, the new cologne, the constant complaints about their modest lifestyle. "She appreciates ambition," Richard said, brushing past Ellie. "She understands what I could have been." Ellie followed him downstairs, words failing her completely. At the door, he turned. "I'll send someone for the rest of my things." The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow hurt worse than the earlier slam. Ellie made it to the couch before her legs gave way. She collapsed onto the worn cushions, her entire body folding in on itself as sobs tore through her chest. 40 years of marriage, gone. Her world, the one she sacrificed everything to build, shattered beyond recognition. Morning light filtered through the dusty blinds, casting stripes across the living room floor. Ellie moved like a sleepwalker, cardboard box in hand, collecting small fragments of her life. The ceramic bluebird Richard had given her on their 5th anniversary. Their children's handprints pressed into clay. Photos she couldn't bear to look at but couldn't throw away. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped each item in newspaper. The church's outreach program had a vacant apartment above their food pantry. Pastor Miller had called early, offering it to her until she got back on her feet. As if 40 years could be gotten over like a twisted ankle. The doorbell's chime startled her. Ellie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and opened the door to find Lillian Carter on her doorstep, holding a casserole dish and wearing a determined expression. "I brought breakfast. Don't argue." Lillian brushed past her into the kitchen, setting down the dish and turning to pull Ellie into a fierce hug. That miserable excuse for a man, I could strangle him with his designer ties. Despite everything, Ellie felt a ghost of a smile. "You're not helping by adding murder to my problems." "Who said anything about murder? I leave him alive to suffer." Lillian served 2 plates of egg casserole. "Eat. You need strength for the battle ahead." Ellie picked at her food. "There's no battle. It's over." Lillian's fork clattered against her plate. "Eleanor Jean Whitfield, look at me." Ellie raised her eyes reluctantly. "You raised 3 children while working full-time. You nursed your mother through cancer. You held this community together during the flood of '98. And you think you can't survive one selfish man walking out? 40 years, Lil. 40 years of you carrying him. More like. Lillian reached across the table, squeezing Ellie's hand. Remember when we were 16 and Tommy Burgess stood you up for prom? You said then what you need to remember now. A memory surfaced, two teenage girls in borrowed dresses, one tear-streaked face, one blazing with righteous anger. His loss, Ellie whispered. Damn straight, his loss. Lillian nodded firmly. You're stronger than you feel right now. They spent the morning sorting through Ellie's belongings, keep, donate, storage. With each decision, Ellie felt both lighter and hollower. When Lillian left, promising to return tomorrow with boxes, the house fell silent again. As evening settled, Ellie wandered from room to room, touching familiar walls, saying goodbye to the life she'd built. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, too exhausted to climb them. I'll sleep on the couch tonight, she told the empty house. She just turned off the kitchen light when the doorbell rang. Ellie frowned. Lillian had her own key, and no one else would visit this late. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a tailor suit standing under the porch light. Not Richard, this man was younger, with kind eyes and a serious expression. He checked his watch, looking uncertain. Ellie cracked the door, security chain in place. Can I help you? Mrs. Whitfield? Eleanor Whitfield? The man's voice was gentle but businesslike. Yes? I apologize for the late hour. My name is Thomas Greer. I'm an attorney with Caldwell, Harrington, and Peters. He offered a business card through the narrow opening. I'm here regarding your uncle, Emmett Whitfield. I have some rather urgent news that couldn't wait until morning. Ellie stared at the card, confusion displacing her grief momentarily. My uncle Emmett? I barely knew him. Nevertheless, Mrs. Whitfield, his passing has direct and significant implications for you. May I come in? Ellie unhooked the chain with trembling fingers. Her terry cloth robe was faded at the elbows, and she crossed her arms self-consciously as she stepped back. Please come in, Mr. Greer. I apologize for the mess I'm in the middle of. She gestured vaguely at the half-packed boxes. Changes. Thomas Greer stepped inside, his polished shoes incongruous against her worn carpet. Ellie reached for her Bible on the side table, holding it close to her chest like armor. Would you like some tea? She offered automatically, decades of hospitality overriding her confusion. No. Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. This won't take long. He placed his leather briefcase on the coffee table and sat when she gestured to the couch. As I mentioned, I'm here about your uncle, Jacob Whitfield. Jacob? Ellie blinked. I thought you said Emmett. My apologies. Jacob Whitfield was your father's brother, correct? The oil man from Texas? Yes, though I only met him twice. Once at my wedding and once at my father's funeral. She perched on the edge of her recliner. Has something happened to him? Thomas nodded solemnly. He passed away last month. Pancreatic cancer. Oh. Ellie felt a distant sadness for a man she barely knew. I'm sorry to hear that. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm here because you were named the primary beneficiary in his will. Her fingers tightened around her Bible. Me? There must be some mistake. We weren't close at all. There's no mistake. Thomas opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder. Your uncle was quite specific. According to the documents he left, he followed your life from afar. He was particularly impressed by your dedication as a nurse and your charitable work. But surely he had other family. No children, no spouse. His closest relative was you. Thomas cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitfield, your uncle's estate is valued at approximately $750 million. The room tilted sideways. Ellie gripped the arm of her chair. 7 million? She whispered. 750 million, Thomas corrected gently. Your uncle's investments in oil, technology, and real estate were quite substantial. Ellie's Bible slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the carpet. Black spots danced before her eyes. Mrs. Whitfield, are you all right? Thomas was suddenly kneeling beside her, a concerned hand hovering near her shoulder. I can't. This can't be real. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Thomas retrieved a bottle of water from his briefcase and offered it to her. I understand this is overwhelming. Perhaps we should continue tomorrow when you've had time to process. No. Ellie took a deep breath. Please continue. I need to understand. For the next hour, Thomas explained the inheritance properties across 3 states: investment portfolios, oil rights, charitable foundations. With each revelation, Ellie felt increasingly untethered from reality. When Thomas finally left, promising to return tomorrow with more paperwork, Ellie locked the door behind him and leaned against it. The house felt both smaller and infinitely vaster than before. Later, in bed, she spread the preliminary inheritance papers across her quilt. Numbers with more zeros than she'd ever seen outside of science textbooks stared back at her. Yesterday, she'd been calculating if she could afford a security deposit on the church apartment. Tonight, she could buy the entire church and the town around it. Ellie picked up her Bible again, opening to where a pressed flower marked Proverbs. The wealth meant nothing without wisdom to guide it. Lord, she whispered into the darkness, her voice small against the weight of her new reality. What am I supposed to do with this? Morning light streamed through the windshield as Ellie navigated her 15-year-old Buick toward downtown. She'd barely slept, her mind racing between disbelief, hope, and the strange guilt that accompanied unexpected fortune. She'd worn her best church dress, navy blue with tiny white flowers, though the hem was slightly frayed. The law firm occupied the top floor of the tallest building in Pine Creek, 4 stories of red brick with gleaming windows. Ellie parked in a visitor spot, her hands still shaking slightly as she turned off the ignition. Just breathe, she whispered to herself, one step at a time. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area with leather chairs and artwork that probably cost more than her car. Thomas greeted her with a warm handshake and led her to a conference room where another man waited. Mrs. Whitfield, this is Stanley Porter, your uncle's personal attorney from Dallas. Stanley's weathered face creased into a smile. Jacob spoke highly of you, Mrs. Whitfield. Said you had your father's integrity. Ellie blinked back unexpected tears. I wish I'd known him better. He was a private man, Stanley said, but he watched your life from afar, kept a file of newspaper clippings about your hospital work, your church volunteering. Thomas spread documents across the polished table. Birth certificates confirming their relation, tax assessments, property deeds, bank statements with numbers that made Ellie's head swim. These are the Texas oil fields, Stanley explained, sliding photographs toward her. Vast stretches of land dotted with pumping units that looked like giant grasshoppers pecking at the earth. They produce approximately 28 million annually. Ellie touched the photos with trembling fingers. And this all belongs to me? Yes, Thomas confirmed, as of 9 o'clock this morning when the probate court processed the final paperwork. Stanley placed another photo before her, a sprawling ranch house with white columns and a wraparound porch. Wolf Creek Ranch. 2,000 acres outside Austin, Jacob's home for the past 30 years. For 3 hours, they walked her through portfolios, trusts, property management companies, and charitable foundations. With each revelation, the reality settled deeper into Ellie's bone. This wasn't a mistake or a dream. We've arranged for a financial advisor, Thomas said, and a security consultant. Wealth of this magnitude requires certain precautions. Precautions, Ellie echoed faintly. People will want things from you, Stanley said gently. Your life is about to change in ways you can't imagine. Outside, the midday sun felt too bright, too harsh. Ellie sat in her car for several minutes, clutching the folder of documents to her chest. Yesterday, she'd been planning how to afford a 1-bedroom apartment after Richard took half their meager savings. Today, she could buy entire neighborhoods, the drive home passing a blur. She parked in front of her modest house, the home where she'd raised her children, where she'd nursed Richard through pneumonia, where she'd prayed through countless midnight worries. $750 million, she whispered, the words still impossible to comprehend. Something broke loose inside her chest. Ellie gripped the steering wheel and burst into tears. Tears of gratitude, confusion, fear, and wonder. She cried for the life she was losing, for Richard's betrayal, for the overwhelming responsibility that had fallen into her lap. What do I do now, Lord? She sobbed. What do you want from me? A cardinal landed on her mailbox, its bright red feathers vibrant against the peeling white paint. It tilted its head as if considering her question, then took flight into the endless blue sky. The doorbell rang as Ellie dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She opened the door to find Lillian clutching a casserole dish, her round face creased with concern. Honey, I brought chicken and dumplings. Figure you might not feel like cooking with everything. Lillian stopped mid-sentence, studying Ellie's face. You've been crying again. What happened at the lawyer's? Bad news? Ellie stepped aside to let her friend in, managing a wobbly smile. Not exactly bad, just overwhelming. In the kitchen, Lillian set down the casserole and turned, hands on her hips. Spill it, Eleanor Jane. I've known you since 8th grade. That's not your my husband left me face. That's something else entirely. Ellie pulled the folder from her purse and slid it across the counter. My uncle Jacob died. The one in Texas you barely knew? Yes. Ellie took a deep breath. He left me everything. Lillian flipped open the folder, her eyes widening as she scanned the documents. The color drained from her face. 700, and she looked up, mouth agape. Million? With an M? Ellie nodded. Lillian sank onto a kitchen stool. Sweet heaven above. She fanned herself with the document. And Richard has no idea? Not unless he's suddenly psychic. Lillian threw back her head and cackled. Oh, this is too perfect. That low-down snake walked out on you for money, and now you've got more than he could. Lil, please. Ellie touched her friend's arm. I don't want to think about Richard right now. But the timing. It's like God himself arranged it for maximum comeuppance. I don't believe God works that way. Ellie poured them both glasses of sweet tea. Besides, I don't want my life turned upside down. I just want to live quietly. Lillian took a long sip, eyebrows raised. Honey, you can't be quiet with $750 million. That's louder than a tornado in a trailer park. I'm still the same person. Ellie gazed around her modest kitchen with its faded curtains and ancient appliances. I don't need mansions or fancy cars. I've got everything I need right here. Except a faithful husband, Lillian muttered. Ellie ignored the comment. I want to help people, Lil. Think of all the good this money could do. The children's hospital wing that needs updating. The homeless shelter downtown. Mr. Peterson, who can't afford his heart medication. Lillian's expression softened. You always did have the biggest heart in Pine Creek. She reached across and squeezed Ellie's hand. Just promise me one thing. What's that? When Richard comes crawling back, and he will, you'll let me be there to see his face. After Lillian left, Ellie wandered through the quiet house. She stopped at the bedroom she shared with Richard for 4 decades. Their wedding photo still sat on the dresser, 2 young faces full of hope and promise. That night, Ellie knelt beside her bed, just as she had every night since childhood. The carpet was worn thin from years of prayers. Lord, she whispered, I don't understand why you've trusted me with this blessing. I'm just a retired nurse who couldn't even keep her marriage together. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver patterns on the wall. Show me how to use this gift wisely, not for revenge or spite, but to heal and restore. Her voice strengthened with resolve. Richard chose money over love. Help me choose love over everything else. A deep peace settled over her as she climbed into bed. For the first time since Richard left, Ellie slept without tears. Sunday morning dawned bright over Pine Creek. Ellie smoothed her floral dress, the same one she'd worn dozens of times before, and drove to First Community Church in her aging sedan. No reason to change her ways just because her bank account had. The white clapboard building with its modest steeple had been her sanctuary for 30 years. As she climbed the steps, Ellie noticed an unusual stillness fall over the churchgoers gathered on the lawn. Conversations hushed, heads turned. Good morning, she said with a smile, clutching her Bible tighter. Deacon Williams rushed forward, taking her elbow. Ellie, let me help you with that door. Thank you, Thomas, but I can manage. Of course you can. But it's my pleasure to assist such a valued member of our congregation. Inside wasn't much better. The usual pre-service chatter dropped to murmurs as she walked down the aisle to her regular pew, third from the front on the right side. Mrs. Peterson, who'd sat beside Ellie every Sunday for 20 years, suddenly had an extraordinary interest in her hymnal. Ellie sank into her seat, cheeks burning. They knew. Somehow, they all knew. Pastor James took the pulpit, his kind eyes finding hers. Today we're discussing Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Ellie almost laughed at the coincidence. Throughout the sermon, she felt the stares. When the collection plate passed, someone behind her whispered loudly enough to hear, "Wonder how much she'll put in now." After the final hymn, Beverly Simmons, who'd barely spoken to Ellie in years, materialized with a dazzling smile. "Eleanor, darling, you look wonderful. We simply must have lunch this week. I'm heading the hospital charity auction, and with your nursing background, I thought you might be interested in serving on the committee." "I'll consider it, Beverly." "Marvelous. I was thinking a $50,000 donation would be appropriate for someone in your new position." Before Ellie could respond, 3 more church members swarmed her, each with invitations, suggestions, and thinly veiled requests. Only Martha Collins, the church secretary who lived on a fixed income, approached Ellie with the same warmth as always. "Tough morning?" Martha asked, linking arms with her. "Is it that obvious? Money changes how people see you, not who you are." Martha squeezed her arm. "Come on, the potluck's starting. I made my 7-layer salad." In the church basement, Ellie filled her plate with comfort foods, fried chicken, potato salad, Martha's famous 7-layer creation. She found a quiet corner table, grateful for a moment's peace. Lillian joined her, leaning in close. "You're the talk of the town. Heard Mrs. Finch say you must have been hiding money all along." "That's ridiculous. People invent the stories they want to believe." Lillian forked a bite of casserole. "By the way, Pastor James keeps looking over here. I think he—" The room suddenly went quiet. Ellie looked up to see what had caused the hush. There in the doorway stood Richard, wearing his Sunday best and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His silver hair was freshly trimmed, and he clutched a store-bought pie in his hands. "Hello, everyone," he called out cheerfully. "Hope I'm not too late for the fellowship." His gaze locked with Ellie's across the room. The fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against her plate. Her throat closed up as blood pounded in her ears. Richard, who had walked out on their marriage days ago, was now walking toward her, his smile widening with each step. Richard navigated the church basement with practiced charm, stopping to shake hands and exchange pleasantries. He placed his pie on the dessert table before making his way to Ellie's corner. "Eleanor," he spoke her full name with uncharacteristic warmth. "May I join you?" Lillian shot to her feet. "I was just leaving." She squeezed Ellie's shoulder and whispered, "Call me later," before departing with a pointed glare at Richard. Richard slid into the vacant chair. "You look well." Ellie found her voice. "What are you doing here, Richard? Can't a man attend church?" He helped himself to a deviled egg from her plate. "I've been doing some thinking, made some mistakes." Ellie's hands trembled. "Mistakes? You served me divorce papers and moved in with another woman." Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I was confused, overwhelmed." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I've been praying about us. There is no us anymore. You made that clear." The basement buzzed with whispers. Everyone watched their exchange from behind casserole dishes and punch cups. Things weren't good between me and Marissa. Richard's face crumpled in what appeared to be genuine distress. "She wasn't who I thought." Pastor James approached their table. "Everything all right here, Ellie?" Richard extended his hand. "Richard Whitfield, Ellie's husband. I know who you are." Pastor James didn't take the offered hand. "Ellie, the children's choir wants to thank you for funding their new robes." He rushed to Ellie's cheeks. "I wanted to do it anonymously. Some gifts are too beautiful to hide." Pastor James smiled warmly at her before turning a cooler gaze to Richard. "Mr. Whitfield, good to see you back in church." After Pastor James left, Richard's eyebrows shot up. New choir robes? That was generous. It was the right thing to do. "You always had a giving heart." Richard's tone shifted. "I heard some interesting news around town. About your uncle?" Ellie's stomach clenched. So there was, the real reason for his return. "I should go home." She stood abruptly. "Let me drive you." Richard jumped up. "I have my car, thank you." Richard followed her outside. "Eleanor, please, I made a terrible mistake. Can we talk tomorrow? Maybe over dinner?" She paused at her car door. "I need time, Richard." "Of course." He touched her arm. "I'll call you." Ellie drove home in a daze, her thoughts churning. The house felt emptier than ever as she kicked off her shoes and sank onto the couch. The phone rang twice that evening, Lillian and then Martha both checking on her. She assured them she was fine, but her heart wasn't convinced. After a simple supper of toast and tea, Ellie pulled out her Bible. The pages fell open to Proverbs. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Richard's words replayed in her mind, his sudden return, his convenient change of heart, the mention of her uncle's money. For 40 years, she trusted him. Now, she couldn't trust her own judgment. Darkness settled around her. Ellie moved to the bedroom window, gazing up at the stars. She remembered her wedding day, the dreams they shared, the life they'd built. And she remembered his coldness when he'd left, how easily he'd discarded their vows. Kneeling beside her bed, Ellie clasped her hands. Her faith taught forgiveness, but wisdom required discernment. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Lord, she whispered into the quiet room, I'm lost. I want to forgive, but I'm afraid. Show me the truth. Help me see Richard's heart clearly. Outside, an owl called into the night. Ellie remained on her knees, waiting for answers in the silence. Morning light filtered through Ellie's curtains as she sat in her rocking chair, a wooden chest opened beside her. Thomas had delivered it yesterday, personal effects from Uncle Jacob that accompanied the inheritance papers. She pulled out a bundle of letters tied with twine. They smelled of cedar and thyme. Most were addressed to my heirs, containing business instructions and investment advice. Uncle Jacob had built his fortune methodically, not through luck, but through decades of disciplined work and foresight. At the bottom of the stack, Ellie found an envelope with her name written in shaky handwriting. Eleanor Whitfield. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. My dear niece Eleanor, we met only twice when you were just a child. I remember a quiet girl with kind eyes who offered me her dessert when she thought I looked sad. That small act of generosity stayed with me all these years. I've watched your life from afar. I know about your nursing career, your devotion to family, your quiet faith that never wavers. You give comfort to strangers while asking nothing in return. This fortune comes with responsibility. Money has power to corrupt or to heal. I've seen both. I chose you as my heir not because we share blood, but because I trust your heart. Wealth without purpose is hollow. I learned this too late. Don't make my mistake. Use this money to bless others, not for recognition or praise, but because giving with love is the only wealth that truly matters. Your uncle, Jacob. Ellie pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Uncle Jacob had seen her, truly seen her when she'd felt invisible to everyone else. Even Richard. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her Bible. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was trust, purpose. After breakfast, Ellie drove downtown. Her ancient sedan still ran fine, and she saw no reason to replace it yet. Some changes could wait. The Heartland Food Pantry occupied an old storefront with fading paint and a crooked sign. Ellie had volunteered here before retirement, sorting donations and filling grocery bags for families who couldn't make ends meet. Martha Wilson, the director, looked up from a stack of invoices when the bell over the door jingled. Ellie, what a nice surprise. Thought I'd stop by. Ellie glanced around at the nearly empty shelves. Things look a bit sparse. Martha sighed. Donations are down, but need is up. I'm trying to figure out how to stretch what we have through the weekend. May I? Ellie gestured to the chair opposite Martha's desk. Of course. Coffee's fresh if you want some. Ellie declined with a smile. Martha, I've been blessed recently, unexpectedly, and I'd like to share that blessing. That's kind, Ellie. We can certainly use whatever you can spare. I'd like to cover the pantry's expenses for the next 3 months. Ellie placed her checkbook on the desk. All of them. Martha blinked. What? Rent, utilities, food costs, everything. But that will be thousands of dollars. I know. Ellie wrote the check with steady hands, then tore it from the book and placed it in Martha's palm. Martha stared at the amount. Her hand flew to her mouth. Ellie, this is how can you? God provides, Ellie said simply. Martha rounded the desk and pulled Ellie into a fierce hug. Tears soaked into Ellie's blouse as Martha clung to her. You have no idea what this means, Martha whispered. We were about to close. So many families depend on us. Warmth bloomed in Ellie's chest, not pride, but something purer. For the first time since Richard left, she felt truly alive. In the days that followed, Ellie established a quiet rhythm to her giving. Each morning began with prayer, seeking guidance on where her help might matter most. She kept a small notebook, jotting down needs she observed or overheard around town. The Miller family's youngest boy needed braces they couldn't afford. Ellie arranged for the orthodontist to receive payment, requesting her name be kept private. The Rodriguez twins deserved college opportunities despite their parents' modest income scholarships materialized through an anonymous donor. Old Mr. Henderson's roof had leaked for 3 winters. Suddenly, a construction crew appeared, repairing it at no cost. Ellie visited Riverside Community Hospital where she'd worked for 30 years. She knew too well how medical bills destroyed families. "I'd like to establish a fund," she told the hospital administrator, keeping her voice low, "for patients who fall through the cracks." "That's very generous, Mrs. Whitfield. What amount were you thinking?" $1 million to start. The administrator's pen clattered to the desk. "I'm sorry, did you say 1 million? Ellie nodded. "I only ask that recipients never know the source." The joy she discovered in this act sustained her. For decades, Ellie had derived meaning from caring for others. Now, with resources beyond her imagination, that purpose expanded. She slept better than she had in years. At Sunny Pines Senior Center, Ellie funded renovations for the recreation room. The piano that had sat silent with broken keys for a decade was replaced. New furnishings made the space warm and inviting. "It's like Christmas," marveled Dorothy, a 90-year-old resident who'd been Ellie's first patient as a young nurse. "Who would do such a wonderful thing?" Ellie just smiled. On Friday afternoon, Ellie met Lillian for their weekly coffee at Maggie's Diner. She ordered her usual black coffee and a slice of apple pie and settled into their corner booth. Lillian arrived looking troubled. "Everything okay?" Ellie asked. Lillian hesitated, stirring her coffee longer than necessary. "I'm not sure I should tell you this." "What is it?" "People are talking, Ellie." A chill ran through her. "About Richard. About you. Your sudden generosity has caused quite a stir. I've tried to keep things anonymous. Small towns have big ears." Lillian sighed. "Most folks are grateful, but some people can't accept kindness without questioning motives." "What are they saying exactly?" Lillian reached across the table and squeezed Ellie's hand. "That you're trying to buy popularity. That it's all for show." The words stung worse than Ellie expected. "Who would think that?" "Marissa started it. She's been telling anyone who'll listen that you're flaunting your money to humiliate her and Richard." "That's not true. I know that." Then Barbara Clark, you remember her from the church council, suggested, "Maybe you feel guilty about having so much when others have so little. That it's about easing your conscience, not really helping." Allie's appetite vanished. Her pie sat untouched, the perfect crust suddenly unappetizing. "I heard Greg Turner say you're just buying love since Richard left," Lillian continued reluctantly. "That if you weren't rich now, nobody would give you a second glance." Tears threatened, but Ellie blinked them back. All her life she tried to do right by others. Now her most heartfelt actions were twisted into something ugly. "I never wanted recognition," she whispered. "I just wanted to help. The people who matter know that," Lillian said firmly. But as Ellie drove home, the accusations echoed in her mind. Was there a way to give that wouldn't invite judgment? Or was judgment simply the price of having more than others? For the first time since receiving her inheritance, Ellie wondered if money might be more curse than blessing. That Sunday, Ellie slipped into her usual pew near the back of Calvary Chapel. Her shoulders felt heavy with the weight of the town's gossip. She'd considered staying home, but faith had always been her anchor in troubled waters. The morning sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting jewel-tone patterns across the worn hymnal in her hands. As the congregation settled, Pastor James Caldwell approached the pulpit, his silver hair catching the light. "Good morning," he began, his voice gentle yet carrying to every corner. "Today, I'd like us to consider what it means to give with a pure heart." Ellie's attention sharpened. In Matthew 6:3-4, Jesus tells us, "When you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret." Pastor James paused, his gaze sweeping across the congregation. "Why in secret?" "Because True charity isn't performed for an audience. It's not about recognition or praise. A murmur rippled through the pews. Ellie kept her eyes fixed on her hands. We live in a world obsessed with appearances, he continued. Social media posts about good deeds, charity, galas, where the cost of tickets exceeds the donations. But authentic giving comes from a place of compassion, not calculation. Pastor James stepped away from the pulpit, moving closer to the congregation. I've been blessed to witness true generosity in our community recently. Acts of kindness done quietly, with no fanfare, medical bills mysteriously paid, homes repaired, children given opportunities they never dreamed possible. His voice warmed. The giver sought no credit, asked for no recognition. That's the purest form of love, expecting nothing in return. Tears pricked Ellie's eyes. She hadn't realized how much she needed these words. After the service, Ellie waited while others filed out. When the sanctuary had emptied, she approached Pastor James. "That was a beautiful sermon," she said softly. He looked up from gathering his notes, his smile reaching the corners of his eyes. "Thank you, Eleanor. I hope it spoke to you." "It did." She hesitated. "How did you know?" "Know what?" His expression remained kind. "That I needed to hear those words today." Pastor James gestured toward a nearby pew, and they both Saturday. "I've noticed the changes happening in town, the good being done, and I've heard the whispers too." "Then you know it's me." "I suspected." He folded his hands. "But the who matters less than the why." "I just want to help," Ellie said simply. "I never expected judgment." "No good deed goes unpunished," Pastor James said with a wry smile. "An unfortunate truth I've observed in 40 years of ministry. But that doesn't make the deed any less good." Something in his understanding loosened the knot in Ellie's chest. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" he asked. "The church office can be lonely, and I've been told I'm a decent listener." "I'd like that," Ellie replied, surprised at her own response. That evening, Ellie sat on her porch swing, watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. Her conversation with Pastor James had stayed with her throughout the day. There had been something refreshing about his presence. No agenda, no flattery, just genuine warmth. In their brief exchange, he'd shown more understanding than Richard had in their final years together. Ellie rocked gently. The creaking of the swing, a comforting rhythm. For the first time since Richard's departure, she didn't feel completely alone. The connection with James, however new and tentative, had sparked something she'd forgotten, the simple pleasure of being understood. She smiled, watching a firefly blink near the rose bushes. Perhaps friendship could be its own kind of healing. 3 days later, Ellie stood at her kitchen sink washing breakfast dishes when the doorbell rang. A familiar car sat in her driveway, Richard's silver Buick. Her stomach tightened. She dried her hands slowly, buying time. The bell chimed again, more insistent. With a deep breath, she crossed to the front door and opened it just enough to see him. Richard stood on her porch, clutching an enormous bouquet of red roses. His expensive haircut couldn't hide the new lines around his eyes, and his smile appeared practiced. "Eleanor," he extended the flowers. "You look lovely." Ellie didn't take the bouquet. "What are you doing here, Richard? Can't a man visit his wife?" His smile faltered when she didn't correct him about their marital status. "Ex-wife," she said quietly. Richard's shoulders slumped. "Please, Ellie, 5 minutes?" Against her better judgment, she stepped back, allowing him into the home they once shared. The same home he'd walked out of without a backward glance. "Marisa left me." He placed the roses on the coffee table and sank onto the sofa. Turns out her money was tied up in trust. She couldn't access it like she claimed. Ellie remained standing. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" His tone sharpened, then immediately softened. "I deserved it. I made the biggest mistake of my life walking away from you." His eyes glistened with what might have been tears. 40 years of marriage had taught Ellie to recognize when Richard was performing. This was his sales pitch face, the one he'd worn when convincing customers to buy whatever scheme he was selling. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of praying." Richard leaned forward. "Remember what Pastor Williams used to say? Marriage is God's laboratory for growing us into the image of Christ." I turned my back on that growth. Ellie almost laughed. Richard had complained bitterly about Pastor William's sermons, calling them sanctimonious drivel. You've changed, Richard gestured around the room. There's something different about you. She felt his gaze assessing her, calculating. The jewelry she wasn't wearing, the simple clothes that revealed nothing of her new circumstances. People are talking about how generous you've become, he continued. The church renovations, the medical bills you've paid. I always knew you had a servant's heart. The room suddenly felt cold. Ellie hadn't made those contributions public, and the church renovations weren't even announced yet. Richard stood, crossing to where she stood. I was blind, Ellie. I threw away a treasure for fool's gold. When he reached for her hands, she stepped back. Richard, why are you really here? His smile froze. To make amends. To ask for forgiveness. And it has nothing to do with what you've heard about my inheritance? A flicker crossed his face, surprise quickly masked. Inheritance? I don't know what you mean. The lie hung between them, transparent as glass. I think you should go. Ellie moved toward the door. Ellie, please. His voice hardened. We have 40 years together. You can't just throw that away. You already did. Richard's mask slipped. You need me. You've never managed money before. People will take advantage. Goodbye, Richard. His jaw tightened, but he gathered his coat. At the door, he turned. I'll call you when you've had time to think clearly. We belong together, Eleanor. After he drove away, Allie closed the door and leaned against it. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. She twisted the deadbolt with a decisive click. Not again, she whispered into the empty house. Never again. 3 days passed, each one easier than the last. The late September morning carried a hint of autumn as Allie pushed open the door to the church cafe. The bell tinkled softly, announcing her arrival. Pastor James sat in the corner booth, 2 steaming mugs already on the table. His weathered face brightened when he spotted her. Right on time, he said, standing briefly as she slipped into the seat across from him. I took the liberty of ordering your usual hazelnut with just a touch of cream. Allie wrapped her hands around the warm mug. You remembered. Some things stick in the mind. His eyes crinkled at the corners. How are you holding up? The question, simple and direct, invited honesty. With Pastor James, pretense felt unnecessary. Better some moments than others. She took a small sip. Richard showed up at my door with roses and scripture. James frowned. That must have been difficult. The hardest part was seeing through it. She traced the rim of her mug. 40 years, and I still wanted to believe him. Grief does that. James' voice carried the weight of personal understanding. We reach for the familiar, even when it hurt us. Ellie looked up. How did you, after Sarah passed, find my footing again? He nodded slowly. Not quickly, not gracefully. Some days I still wake up reaching for her side of the bed. The cafe hummed with quiet conversation around them. But in their corner, a pocket of shared understanding formed. Does it ever stop hurting? Ellie asked. It changes shape. He met her eyes. The pain becomes less of a stabbing and more of an ache. Then one day, you realize you've gone hours without feeling it at all. Ellie nodded. I'm angry with myself for wasting so many years. They weren't wasted. James leaned forward. You loved genuinely. You built a family. You shaped lives through your nursing. Nothing true is ever wasted, Ellie. Something loosened in her chest. I never thought I'd be starting over at 62. Second chances don't check our birth certificates. His smile was gentle. My grandmother found love at 84, married a fellow from her painting class. Ellie laughed, surprising herself. Really? Happiest 2 years of her life. He sipped his coffee. She taught me that joy doesn't have an expiration date. Outside, autumn leaves swirled past the window. Inside, the conversation flowed easily between them about books they loved, places they hoped to see, small joys that sustained them. Ellie found herself sharing thoughts she'd kept private for years. I should let you get back to your sermon writing, she said eventually, noticing the time. This was more important. James stood as she did. Same time next week? The question held no pressure, just warmth. Ellie nodded. I like that. They parted at the church steps, and Ellie decided to walk home, enjoying the crisp air. 3 blocks from her house, a sense of contentment washed over her. For the first time in months, she felt lighter. As she rounded the corner onto her street, that lightness evaporated. A familiar figure stood near her driveway, Richard, leaning against his car, watching her approach. His posture suggested he'd been waiting a while. Ellie slowed her steps. The peaceful feeling from her coffee with James drained away, replaced by a cold trickle of apprehension. Richard's face remained unreadable at this distance, but his stance, shoulders squared, arms crossed, sent a clear message. He'd been watching, waiting, planning. Fear prickled along her skin as she realized this wasn't just another attempt at reconciliation. This was something more calculated, more determined, and she was walking straight toward it. Richard's unwelcome presence lingered in Ellie's thoughts that night, but by morning, she woke with a sudden clarity. She wouldn't leave trapped by fear or manipulated by his schemes. Over breakfast, she flipped through her father's old photo album. Her fingers traced the faded image of him in his uniform, standing proud before shipping out to Korea. Another showed him years later at the veterans' home, surrounded by men who understood what no one else could. The place had fallen into disrepair over the years, its funding cut and building crumbling. "That's it," Ellie whispered to the empty kitchen. "That's what I need to do." 3 days later, Ellie stood on the cracked steps of the old veterans' home, clipboard in hand. The 2-story brick building had boarded windows and a sagging roof. Weeds pushed through the walkway where her father once sat with his friends. "It's got good bones," said Mike Harrington, the contractor who'd arrived to assess the damage. "But we're looking at complete electrical, new plumbing, roof repair, not to mention whatever it needs," Ellie said firmly. "I want it done right." Mike scratched his head. "You sure about this, Mrs. Whitfield? Place has been empty nearly 7 years. My father found peace here when nowhere else made sense to him." Her voice softened. Other veterans deserve the same. Word spread quickly. By afternoon, a dozen community members gathered at the site, eager to volunteer. Some faces Ellie recognized from church, others were strangers drawn by the prospect of meaningful work. "I can handle the garden rehabilitation," offered Mrs. Peterson, a retired botanist. "My husband was in Vietnam. This would mean something to him." A young man with tattoos covering his arms stepped forward. "My grandfather talked about this place. I'm a carpenter, could rebuild those railings, no charge." Ellie's heart swelled. This was what wealth was for, not revenge or status, but building something lasting. She stood in what once was a common room, plaster crumbling from the ceiling, imagining it filled with comfortable chairs, a television, bookshelves. The kitchen would need new everything, but she could picture veterans gathering for meals, sharing stories, finding community. It's a beautiful vision. Ellie turned to find Pastor James in the doorway, a gentle smile on his face. "I wasn't sure anyone would want to help," she admitted. "People recognize genuine goodness when they see it." James stepped carefully over debris to join her by the window. "Your father would be proud." The afternoon sun streamed through broken blinds, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. "Richard came by again yesterday," she said quietly. "Wanted to help with my finances." James's eyes darkened. "And you told him my accountant handles everything now?" A small smile played at her lips. He didn't like that answer. "Good for you." Pride warmed his voice. They stood in companionable silence, surveying the room's potential. "Would you pray with me?" Ellie asked suddenly. "For this place, for the men and women who will find refuge here?" James nodded, taking her hand naturally, as if they'd done this 100 times before. His palm felt warm against hers. "Lord," he began, voice steady and sure, "we stand in a place of brokenness, asking you to guide its restoration. Not just these walls, but the hearts of those who will find shelter here." As his prayer continued, Ellie opened her eyes briefly, watching sunlight transform the decrepit room. For a moment, she could see what it would become, not just repaired, but reborn. Days stretched into weeks as the veterans' home transformation gained momentum. Ellie arrived each morning with coffee and donuts for the volunteers, her car now recognized by the cheerful honk she gave, turning into the gravel driveway. "Mrs. Whitfield, come see what we finished yesterday." Tommy Jensen, the tattooed carpenter, waved her toward the main hall, where gleaming oak railings now lined the walls. "My grandfather would have appreciated these. He used a walker his last years." Ellie ran her hand along the smooth wood. "They're beautiful, Tommy." The once abandoned building hummed with activity. Ladders leaned against freshly painted walls in soft blues and greens, chosen specifically for their calming properties. The electrical crew had finished rewiring the entire structure, and modern lighting brightened corners that had lain in shadow for years. In the garden, Mrs. Peterson directed a team of volunteers planting wheelchair-accessible raised beds. Gardening therapy, she explained, helps with PTSD. My Harold found peace growing tomatoes after Vietnam. Ellie nodded, throat tight with emotion. These weren't just repairs. This was healing made physical. One rainy Tuesday, an elderly man in a Korean War veteran's cap appeared at the site. He walked with a cane, observing the work quietly until Ellie approached him. "Can I help you, sir?" "Frank Daniels," he said, voice gruff. "Served with your father, heard what you were doing." Ellie's hand flew to her heart. "You knew my dad?" Frank nodded, eyes misting. "Bass radio operator in our unit. Saved my life outside Incheon." He gestured toward the building. "This place was home when I couldn't sleep in my own bed. Wife couldn't understand the nightmares." That afternoon, Frank sat in a folding chair, telling stories to the volunteers during lunch break. Young and old gathered around, mesmerized by first-hand history. Ellie watched as teenagers, who normally bury themselves in phones, leaned forward, asking questions. "Will you come back for the dedication?" Ellie asked as Frank prepared to leave. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Eleanor." He squeezed her hand. "Your daddy would be bursting with pride." Pastor James became a regular presence, sometimes wielding a paintbrush, other times simply bringing encouragement and cold lemonade. Ellie found herself looking for him whenever she arrived, her day brightening when he appeared. The town council voted unanimously to support ongoing maintenance costs. James told her one afternoon as they inspected the new kitchen appliances. "Your initial funding inspired them." "It wasn't just me," Ellie insisted. "Look at everyone here." He smiled. "That's what makes you special, Ellie. You don't just give money, you give heart." As the 6th week of renovation ended, Mike Harrington handed Ellie the final inspection report. "All systems go," he announced. "This place exceeds code requirements now. We can schedule the dedication ceremony." The news spread rapidly through Meadowbrook. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with before and after photos. The high school band volunteered to perform. 3 different church groups offered to provide refreshments. Ellie stood in the completed common room, now furnished with comfortable chairs, bookshelves filled with donations, and a wall of honor displaying veterans' photographs, her father's prominently among them. A peace she hadn't felt in months settled over her. That evening at the volunteer appreciation dinner, Ellie tapped her glass for attention. 2 weeks from Saturday, she announced, her voice clear and confident. The Meadowbrook Veterans Home will officially reopen. Cheers erupted. As plates clattered and conversations buzzed with excitement, Ellie caught James watching her from across the room. His eyes filled with something that made her heart quicken. For the first time since Richard left, Ellie felt completely, genuinely happy. The morning of the dedication dawned with golden autumn sunshine. Ellie woke early, smoothing her new navy dress with trembling hands. After months of work, today marked not just the reopening of the veterans' home, but her own rebirth. She arrived 2 hours early to ensure everything was perfect. Chairs lined the front lawn in neat rows. Red, white, and blue bunting draped the freshly painted porch. The high school band warmed up behind a small podium where the mayor would speak. "You've outdone yourself," James said, appearing at her side in his Sunday suit. "This will change lives for generations." "I hope so." Ellie adjusted the floor arrangement. "My father would have loved this." By 10 o'clock, the grounds overflowed with townspeople. Veterans in uniform sat in the front row, Frank Daniels among them, medals gleaming on his chest. Children darted between clusters of adults, balloons tied to their wrists. Even the skeptics who'd questioned her motives had come. Mayor Wilson tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather to celebrate an extraordinary gift to our community." Ellie sat quietly, hands folded in her lap as he praised her vision and generosity. She barely heard the words. Focused instead on the veterans' faces, men and women who'd given so much and asked for so little in return. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. The ribbon cutting brought thunderous applause. Dozens line up to tour the renovated facility, exclaiming over the library, the garden, the medical suite. Ellie stood near the refreshment table, accepting congratulations when she spotted him. Richard, moving through the crowd toward her, his face set in determination. Her stomach clenched. Ellie, he reached for her hand. Quite the spectacle you've created. She withdrew her fingers from his grasp. It's for the veterans, Richard. Of course. His smile didn't reach his eyes. May I speak with you privately? Before she could refuse, a courier approached, extending an envelope. Eleanor Whitfield. Urgent delivery requiring immediate signature. Confused, Ellie signed for the envelope. Opening it, she scanned the legal document inside, the words blurring before her eyes. What is this? She whispered. Richard's smile widened. Just making sure I get what's rightfully mine, dear. 40 years of marriage entitles me to half of everything, including your inheritance. Blood drained from her face. You're suing me? It's just business. He shrugged. My attorney says it's an open and shut case. People nearby had stopped talking, heads turning toward them. Whispers rippled outward like stones dropped in still water. You left me, Ellie said, voice shaking. You walked out on our vows. Temporary insanity. Richard spoke loudly enough for others to hear. I've come to my senses, and the law is clear about marital assets. James appeared at her side. Everything all right, Ellie? Richard's eyes narrowed. Pastor, how convenient you've been comforting my wife. Ex-wife, Ellie corrected, but her voice sounded small even to herself. The lawsuit documents trembled in her hand as Richard nodded to onlookers and walked away, leaving devastation in his wake. The celebration continued around her, but the joy had evaporated like morning dew. Hours later, in her quiet living room, Ellie finally broke. The papers lay scattered on her coffee table, demanding half of everything, accusing her of hiding assets, threatening to drag her through court. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders heaving with sobs. Lord, I try to do good, she whispered through tears. Why does it feel like I'm being punished? Only silence answered as darkness fell outside her window. Sunlight streamed through Thomas Greer's office windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Ellie sat across from him, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The lawsuit papers spread between them like a minefield. I feel so foolish, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Everyone at the dedication saw. By now the whole town knows. Thomas leaned forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her inner turmoil. Ellie, listen to me. Richard has virtually no chance of winning this case. But he seemed so confident. Of course he did. Thomas tapped the documents with his pen. That's his strategy, intimidation. But the law is clear. Your uncle's inheritance came to you after the separation was finalized. It's not marital property. Ellie sighed, shoulders dropping slightly. He'll drag this out, won't he? He'll try. Thomas removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. Court battles can be draining emotionally and financially. But you have something Richard doesn't. What's that? The truth? And me. His smile was reassuring. I've been practicing estate law for 23 years. I've seen this play out many times. Ellie nodded, though anxiety still gnawed at her. The money isn't what worries me most. It's the gossip. People were just starting to trust my intentions. And now they'll see who Richard truly is. Thomas finished. These things have a way of revealing character. Outside the office window, two women passed by, glancing in. They whispered to each other, then hurried along. Ellie's cheeks burned. See, it's starting already. Thomas closed the folder. Focus on what matters, Ellie. Your work with the veterans' home, your faith, the people who truly know you. On her way home, Ellie stopped at the grocery store. She needed normalcy, routine milk, eggs, bread, simple things to anchor her. But the moment she entered, conversations hushed. Eyes followed her down each aisle. At the checkout, Marge Bennett, who'd known Ellie for 20 years, rang up her items without meeting her gaze. Is everything okay, Marge? Ellie asked quietly. Fine. Marge bagged the groceries with methodical precision. Though I always said money changes people, the words stung like a slap. I haven't changed, Marge. Richard says different. Says you hid the inheritance from him, forced him out. She finally looked up. Two sides to every story, I suppose. Ellie opened her mouth to defend herself, then closed it. Explaining would only feed the gossip mill. She paid and left, cheeks burning with humiliation. At home, she unloaded groceries with trembling hands. The phone rang. Lillian, checking in. It's all over town, her friend said. Richard's playing the victim masterfully. Thomas says he won't win. That's not the point for Richard, is it? He wants to hurt you, embarrass you. Ellie sank into a kitchen chair. He's succeeding. Only if you let him, Lillian said firmly. Remember who you are. After hanging up, Ellie wandered to her father's old Bible on the bookshelf. She opened it randomly, fingers tracing the worn pages until words caught her eye. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Something settled in her chest, not peace exactly, but resolve. She squared her shoulders and looked out the window toward the newly dedicated veteran's home in the distance. I won't let him take my peace, she whispered, strength returning to her voice. No matter the outcome. The afternoon light caught the silver in her hair, illuminating her like a crown. The courtroom's hard wooden bench dug into Ellie's back as she sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. Thomas had advised her to wear something modest but dignified. She'd chosen a simple navy dress with a cardigan, her silver hair neatly pinned back. Richard, by contrast, had dressed like he was auditioning for a part-expensive suit, gold cufflinks she'd never seen before, hair freshly colored to hide the gray. Your Honor, Richard said, voice dripping with practiced sincerity. I supported Eleanor through 40 years of marriage. Every sacrifice was made together, every hardship weathered as one. Ellie bit the inside of her cheek. The courtroom wasn't full, but familiar faces from town dotted the gallery, some supportive, others curious, a few clearly there to gather gossip. Richard continued his performance. I worked tirelessly while she pursued her nursing career. When the children needed braces, when the roof leaked, when times were tough, I was there, making it all possible. Thomas shifted beside her, jotting notes. They'd prepared for this Richard's revisionist history, his talent for twisting truth. Our separation was merely a trial period, Your Honor, a cooling off. I never intended permanent divorce. Richard's voice caught theatrically. Then suddenly, I discover she's inherited this fortune and shut me out completely. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes, glanced at Ellie, then back to Richard. Mr. Whitfield, court records show you filed for divorce, not your wife. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and were filed well before this inheritance came to light. Richard's smile faltered momentarily. Yes, and you moved in with another woman immediately after leaving the marital home? A friend offered temporary lodging during our difficulties. A few murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Ellie kept her eyes forward, remembering Thomas's advice. Don't react. Don't give him the satisfaction. When finally asked to speak, Ellie stood. Her voice was soft but steady. Your Honor, I worked double shifts at Memorial Hospital for 38 years. I paid for our children's college education from my nursing salary. When Richard's business ventures failed, all 7 of them, I covered our mortgage. She paused. I never complained because marriage meant partnership to me. Judge Morris studied her. And this inheritance? My uncle left it to me 3 weeks after Richard filed for divorce. I hadn't spoken to my uncle in years. It was as much a shock to me as anyone. She's lying, Richard interrupted. She must have known. Mr. Whitfield, the judge said sharply, you'll have your turn. Thomas presented the timeline, the divorce filing, Richard's departure, the date of the uncle's death, and the notification of inheritance. The dates were irrefutable. Richard's attorney tried redirecting, painting Richard as a devoted husband blindsided by fortune's timing. With each question, Richard's answers grew more dramatic, more wounded, his eyes occasionally darting to the spectators as if checking whether they believed his performance. Your Honor, he said finally, all I'm asking for is fairness. The wealth came during our marriage. After you filed for divorce, the judge corrected and represents the culmination of our life together. Judge Morris checked her watch. We'll take a 30-minute recess. Court will resume at 11:15. Outside in the hallway, Ellie leaned against the wall, legs suddenly weak. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply through the nausea rising in her throat. Pastor James approached, offering a bottle of water. You are doing wonderfully. I feel like I'm on trial for being me. she whispered. That's exactly what you're on trial for, he said gently. And you're winning. Ellie straightened, smoothed her dress, and looked toward the courtroom doors with quiet determination. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, she truly believed she would emerge victorious. Evening shadows stretched across Ellie's living room as she closed the front door behind her. The house felt unnaturally quiet after the tension-filled courtroom. She slipped off her shoes, made a simple cup of tea, and carried it to the small alcove near the kitchen window, her prayer corner, where a worn cushion and her mother's quilt created a sanctuary of sorts. The day's events replayed in her mind, Richard's performance, the whispers in the courtroom, the weight of judgment from people who once called themselves friends. Exhaustion settled into her bones, deeper than physical tiredness. Ellie knelt on the cushion, her knees protesting slightly. She placed her Bible on the windowsill and opened it to the Psalms, finding comfort in the well-thumbed pages. Outside, twilight painted the sky in deepening shades of purple. Lord, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. I don't know what to do. The anger inside me scares me. Part of me wants to fight Richard for every penny, to make him hurt the way he hurt me. A tear slid down her cheek, landing on the open Bible. But that's not who I want to be. That's not who you made me to be. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the silence envelop her. Minutes passed. The tea beside her grew cold, forgotten. Slowly, a calm settled over her. Not the absence of pain, but something deeper, more substantial. A clarity she hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Not vengeance, she whispered. Wisdom. The words from Proverbs floated through her mind. When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. Richard's pride had been consuming him for years. She saw that now with painful clarity. His desperate grab for her inheritance wasn't just about money. It was about his inability to face his own failures. Ellie stood, her decision crystallizing. She wouldn't fight fire with fire. She wouldn't allow bitterness to reshape her. Instead, she'd offer him enough to live comfortably, not the fortune he sought, but freedom from their entanglement. She moved to her small desk and pulled out a notepad. With steady hands, she began calculating figures, considering what would be fair without being foolish. A clean break, a path forward for both of them. The phone rang, startling her from her calculations. Lillian's voice came through, concerned. I heard about today, that snake, trying to paint himself as the victim. It's all right, Lil. I've made a decision. Please tell me you're going to fight him tooth and nail. Ellie smiled sadly. No, I'm going to offer him a settlement. What? After everything he's done? Ellie, he doesn't deserve a penny. This isn't about what he deserves. It's about who I am. Ellie touched the cross pendant at her neck. I can't spend the next year of my life in courtrooms and bitterness. I need to move forward. Silence stretched between them. You're a better person than I am, Lillian finally said. But are you sure? He'll think he won. Let him think what he wants. I'll know the truth. After hanging up, Ellie called Thomas. Despite the late hour, he answered promptly. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I've made a decision about the case. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Ellie drove to Thomas's office, the settlement proposal tucked into her purse. She slept better than she had in weeks. The burden of indecision lifted. Thomas greeted her in the lobby, concern evident in his eyes. You sounded resolute on the phone, he said, leading her to his office. I hope you didn't lose sleep over yesterday's proceedings. Richard's theatrics won't sway Judge Morris. Ellie settled into the chair opposite his desk. I didn't lose sleep. In fact, I found clarity. She pulled out her notes and slid them across to him. I want to offer Richard a settlement. Thomas's eyebrows rose as he glanced at the figures. You realize we have a strong case? The inheritance came after he filed for divorce. The judge seemed skeptical of his claims. I know, but this isn't about winning a legal battle. It's about freeing myself from this anchor of resentment. Thomas studied the proposal carefully. This is generous, considering the circumstances. $5 million, plus the vacation property in Colorado, is enough for him to live very comfortably for the rest of his life. But it's structured so he can't touch the principal for 5 years, only the interest. That gives him time to, I hope, find some perspective. And in exchange, He drops all claims to the inheritance, signs a non-disclosure agreement about the details of our settlement, and agrees to no further contact. Thomas leaned back, studying her with new eyes. You've thought this through all night, she admitted with a small smile. I believe it's fair without being foolish, generous without enabling his worst instincts. And if he refuses? Ellie straightened her shoulders. Then we continue in court, but I'm offering him a dignified exit. Pride is Richard's weakness, not mine. Thomas nodded slowly, a look of genuine admiration crossing his face. Most clients in your position would want blood, especially after his performance yesterday. I don't need his blood. I need my peace. The morning light streamed through the office windows, casting a warm glow across the desk between them. Thomas gathered the papers, typing them into a neat stack. You're choosing grace over war, he said quietly. It's not what I expected, but I think it's wise. Litigation drains more than bank accounts, it drains the soul. Ellie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Exactly. I've spent 40 years with Richard. I won't spend another day letting him determine my happiness. Ellie sat quietly in the courtroom, the steady murmur of voices blending into a distant hum. She focused on the polished oak table in front of her, taking slow, deep breaths. This was it. The moment she would turn the page and start anew. Across the room, Richard lounged with a self-satisfied air, a smirk playing at his lips. Ellie remembered how he once looked at her with love, how those same eyes now held only entitlement. She brushed aside the memory, focusing on the present. The judge, an austere woman with silver hair pinned tightly back, entered and called the court to order. Ellie's lawyer, Thomas, stood, holding the terms of the settlement in his hand. Your Honor, my client has considered the situation carefully and made an offer to resolve the matters between herself and Mr. Whitfield. We believe it's fair and reflective of Mrs. Whitfield's desire to conclude this matter amicably. Thomas passed the papers to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. Richard sat up straighter, a gleam of triumph in his eyes. Your Honor, it seems we can avoid a prolonged battle. I accept the terms, he announced loudly, as though he'd orchestrated the whole affair. The judge glanced at the papers, her expression unreadable. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. However, acceptance of the settlement doesn't alter the legal standing of the inheritance. Richard's smile faltered as he leaned forward. What do you mean? The judge looked at him over her glasses. The inheritance received post-separation and post-divorce filing remains solely the property of Mrs. Whitfield. Your claims to it have no support under the law. Silence fell like a stone. Richard's flush darkened to a deep crimson, his bravado replaced by shock. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, the faint rustle of pages and shifting feet the only sound. Beside him, Thomas' lips twitched in a restrained smile. Ellie felt a strange mix of pity and relief wash over her, like watching an old scar finally fade. Richard spluttered, but the settlement remains as presented. The judge confirmed unyielding. Mrs. Whitfield's offer was generous, given the circumstances. Humiliation settled over Richard, his smug veneer crumbling. He opened his mouth, a torrent of protest clearly forming, but the judge glanced at the clock, signaling the matter was closed. Court is adjourned. A gavel came down with a resounding crack, sealing Richard's fate. Ellie stood, her legs steady for the first time in years. The echoes of the gavel seemed to whisper freedom, the air laced with relief. As the courtroom emptied, she saw Richard, still seated, disbelief etched into his features. For a moment, their eyes met. She didn't feel the anger she'd expected, only a quiet resolution. They were finally untethered. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sky began to clear. Sunlight pierced the heavy clouds, casting brilliant shafts across the steps. Ellie paused, letting the warmth seep into her skin, soaking in the feeling of absolute release. Lillian, who had been waiting anxiously by the entrance, rushed forward, her arms wide with jubilance. You did it! Lillian's voice brimmed with pride as she enveloped Ellie in a tight hug. You're free, truly free. Ellie hugged her back, the tears welling up but not from sadness anymore. They were tears of liberation, of doors opening where walls once stood. I am, Ellie whispered, the words tasting sweet and new. I really am. As they slowly descended the courthouse steps, every breath felt lighter, the future now an open road stretching infinitely ahead. The sun bathed the town in a warm, golden glow, promising new beginnings. Ellie smiled, her heart swaying to a melody of hope. She was ready to step onto life's new path. The burdens of the past finally laid to rest. Weeks passed, and with them, the whispers that had once haunted Allie's every step in town had faded like a distant echo. The once dilapidated veterans' home now stood proudly, a testament to the power of community and the redemptive strength found in generosity. The morning of the ribbon cutting dawned crisp and bright, a promise of new beginnings hanging in the air. Ellie felt her heart flutter with anticipation as she approached the freshly painted building, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. Banners flapped gently in the breeze, and rows of chairs were set up for the eager crowd. People from all corners of the town arrived, eager to witness the culmination of months of hard work. Volunteers buzzed around like excited bees, putting the final touches on banners and floral arrangements. The sweet scent of freshly planted flowers wafted through the air, mingling with the joyous hum of conversation. Ellie stood near the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. Pastor James appeared at her side, his eyes reflecting the deep satisfaction that mirrored her own emotions. "You did it, Ellie. Look at what you accomplished," he said, gesturing towards the restored home with a proud smile. "We all did it together," Ellie replied, her voice brimming with sincerity. Pastor James looked out at the crowd gathered before them. "Comfort in community," he said, nodding toward the clusters of people, children on their parents' shoulders, a group of elderly veterans in their uniforms, a host of smiling faces looking ahead at the building that was now a beacon of hope. "It's beautiful, Ellie," he continued, his voice steady and warm, "and not just the home. It's what you've done for everyone here." Ellie felt her face flush. "Thank you, James. But really, I'm just grateful for them and for you." Her voice wavered for a moment. "I didn't get here alone." He took her hand, a grounding warmth at her side. They shared a glance that spoke more than words could convey: understanding, companionship, an unspoken promise that had grown between their smiles and shared moments at the veterans' home. As the clock struck noon, Pastor James stepped forward, signaling quiet. The crowd stilled, expectant, eyes on Ellie. Despite her nerves, there was a strange calm in the moment, an assurance that this was where she was meant to be. "Thank you all for being here today," Ellie began, her voice clear and steady. The microphone carried her words, each syllable wrapping around the gathered townsfolk like a comforting embrace. "This home belongs to us all, a reminder that no one is truly forgotten nor alone." The sun gleamed in the sky, framing Ellie and James in its golden light. Generations of families stood before her children in their Sunday best, parents with shining eyes, veterans standing proud in their dress blues, medals glinting. "This home is for every soul who needs a sanctuary, a place to heal and to find hope once again," she continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "It is dedicated to the forgotten, the broken, and the brave." Applause roared through the crowd, echoing off the surrounding trees. Faces shone with admiration and gratitude, a testament to the healing power of community. Tears sparkled in more than a few eyes. Laughter danced in the bright afternoon air. Ellie took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all her past sorrow begin to lift, replaced by this moment's overwhelming joy. She glanced at James, whose reassuring nod gave her the courage to lift the golden scissors. As she cut the ribbon, the air seemed to shimmer with possibility. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers rising like a joyous anthem. Ellie stepped back, her heart full, knowing this was just the beginning. She had found her purpose anew, not just in wealth, but in the strength and love that had grown amid the trials. And as the townsfolk began to spill into the restored home, she felt James squeeze her hand gently, a silent measure of shared dreams and hope for the future. Gratitude filled her heart, expanding beyond the scars and shadows of betrayal, encompassing the new family she had forged with faith and grace. For the first time in a long time, Eleanor Allie Whitfield allowed herself to hope, to truly love. She turned towards the crowd, her heart as open as the doors she had unlocked, each step a testament to the resilience and renewal of the human spirit. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, the volunteers gathered at Allie's modest home. The kitchen hummed with warmth, a fragrant medley of home-cooked dishes laid out across the table. Roasted chicken, fresh garden vegetables, and warm cornbread invited everyone to eat and feel at home. Ellie moved among her friends, her heart full. Laughter filled the cozy room, light bouncing off the walls, mingling with a soft clinking of glasses and joyful chatter. The remnants of hard work still lingered in the stories shared, bound by the camaraderie built over paintbrushes and hammers. "You've got more energy than us youngsters," joked Lillian, stacking plates at the table. Her gaze held admiration, reflecting everyone's gratitude. "Oh, it's just adrenaline," Ellie replied with a playful grin, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "And maybe a bit of divine intervention." As laughter subsided, Pastor James stood, glass in hand. The room's attention shifted to him, a respectful silence falling over the gathering. His smile was soft yet strong, filled with the honesty that had drawn so many to his church's embrace. "Ellie," he began, his voice carrying a warmth that resonated deep within those gathered, "tonight we celebrate not just the completion of a project, but the embodiment of faith and perseverance. You've reminded us all of what truly matters: community, kindness, and the courage to stand up and make a difference." Ellie felt a blush rise and spread across her cheeks, a mix of pride and humility swelling her heart. She glanced at each face crinkled with smiles, shining with tears. This was her family, built of shared dreams and the aspirations she dared embrace. To Ellie, James concluded, raising his glass, his gaze locked with hers, "for leading with heart and for showing us all the power of love grounded in faith." The room erupted in a chorus of toasts, glasses clinking, echoes of good-natured laughter, spilling into the twilight beyond. As the night wore on, guests filtered outside, lingering hugs exchanged on the doorstep. One by one, they drifted home. The sounds of their footsteps mingled with cicadas' evening song. Soon, only Ellie and James remained. The house, once full of vibrant life, now held a gentle stillness. At the door, James hesitated, searching Ellie's eyes, his hand brushing hers, a silent question. She met his gaze, an unspoken understanding dancing between them, the possibility of a new beginning. As they stood together in the gentle glow of the porch light, she felt the pull of something tender, something promising. A tender smile graced her lips, mirrored precisely by James. The silence enveloped them, not as a blank space, but an embrace of what lay ahead, signaling a journey together, a newfound chapter awaiting to be written. The weeks unfurled like pages in a cherished novel, each day etched with small yet profound moments. Ellie and James basked in the vibrant tapestry of their evolving friendship, from shared glances across the church pews to the comfortable proximity during community events. James had a way of drawing Ellie into the present. He'd approach her at each gathering not with questions, but with stories, heartfelt tales about people they knew, softly wielded like polished stones, meant to shine optimism on life's rugged path. Together, they visited local hospitals, quietly comforting the sick and weary. With Ellie's nursing background and James's natural empathy, their presence became a balm, a testament to their all-encompassing compassion. The ranch, once an unfamiliar inheritance from a distant uncle, gradually transformed into a sanctuary. Ellie found herself walking through the sprawling fields with James by her side, stepping in sync with the rustle of wind over grass. Conversations flowed as freely as the river nearby, meandering through topics both light and poignant. Each step across the land deepened their bond, a melding of shared purpose and unguarded laughter amidst the whisper of leaves. Each visit cemented the realization that what lay beneath the surface of wealth was the gift of renewal, the opportunity to build bridges from solitude into connectedness. One Sunday afternoon, the sky stretched wide, speckled with strokes of golden and pink hues as the sun began its descent. Ellie found herself sitting with James on the porch, chairs angled towards heaven, the horizon a breathtaking canvas in transition. Together, they watched as day gave way to twilight. Silence filled the spaces between them, comforting, like an embrace of unspoken promises. James leaned back, eyes reflecting the fading light, as if capturing every color in the spectrum of falling dusk. "You deserve joy, not just survival," James murmured, his words gentle as a touch upon the cheek. Ellie turned, eyes meeting his, glistening with unshed tears. She felt the truth of his sentiments seep through her, a revelation, a challenge. Ellie had long weighed each of life's turns with survival as an act of defiance against loneliness and betrayal. Now, amidst this peaceful moment, she knew James was encouraging her to reach beyond resilience, to embrace a life woven with happiness and fulfillment. Her heart swelled, the burgeoning affection between them palpable, rooted deep in the soil of shared faith and mutual respect. The sunset mirrored their newfound hope. Ellie let her smile widen, drawing James into the warmth of its promise. Ellie's heart swelled with gratitude as she walked through the newly restored veterans' home, now brimming with energy and laughter. Only a few months had passed since the ribbon-cutting ceremony, yet the transformation was profound. The once quiet building now echoed with voices and life, the air filled with warmth and joy, a living testament to resilience and hope. Children, full of laughter and curiosity, played tag across the emerald lawn as fathers and grandfathers cheered them on, their smiles lines carved deeper than any time had managed. Under the shade of the towering oaks, veterans shared stories of valor and camaraderie, their voices mingling with birdsong, a harmony of experiences both poignant and uplifting. Ellie watched the scene unfold from the porch, her soul wrapped in contentment. Her father had cherished service and sacrifice, a legacy Ellie had woven into the fabric of this sanctuary. Around her, families reunited, coming together like frayed ends stitched into a vibrant tapestry. Many navigated through memories of love, loss, and celebration, the threads of their lives hauntingly beautiful against the backdrop of resilience. To Ellie, each day here felt like a brushstroke, commemorating the spirit her father had cherished. The veterans' home was more than just brick and mortar. It was a promise fulfilled. Ellie's promise to honor her father, her past, and countless stories echoed within its walls. The decision to restore it had been an offering, a prayer, and now, seeing it pulsate with life, Ellie felt answered in ways only the heart comprehends. James approached from her right, his gait steady and familiar like a favorite melody. He joined her on the porch, his presence as comforting as the embrace of a dear friend on a long journey. His eyes carried the glow of shared triumph, a reflection of everything they had borne together. "Look at them," James murmured, nodding toward a group of veterans chuckling over shared memories. "Your father's spirit lives on in each of their stories." James's words resonated within Ellie. They held the weight of truth and the liberation love bestows. The rebuild was an embodiment of everything she and James believed in, a legacy entwined with friendship, faith, and newfound family. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Ellie replied, her gaze stretching across the landscape, hands clasping the air in reverence and release. Nearby, a child tugged at her father's shirt, pointing towards Ellie. With gentle persuasion, the father approached, his eyes carrying a blend of gratitude and curiosity. "Are you the one who made all this possible?" he asked, voice tinged with awe. Ellie smiled, humbled, and heartened. "Not me alone. This was a community effort, a gift to cherish together." James nudged her gently, pride evident in his gaze. His silent affirmation, as inevitable as breath among stars, enfolded Ellie. With James by her side, she never needed to explain the beauty of simple moments. They understood life's rhythms in silent companionship. As dusk settled into the folds of earth and sky, Ellie and James lingered on the porch, halcyon warmth enveloping them. Around them, conversations lifted like the wings of possibility, every word a quiet benediction. Hand in hand with James, Ellie let the night carry her prayer. "Lord, you turned ashes into beauty," she whispered, voice a tender mosaic crafted from jagged edges and soft light. The path she had forged through life's trials now led to a place of peace, a frontier laced with authenticity and love. She had found something deep within, transcending wealth and hardship, As Ellie smiled into the night, she understood that her journey had come full circle. Love and purpose had taken root in her heart, making her days not of luxury but full of life. And amidst the laughter, through shared struggles and healing embraces, Ellie finally felt complete. If you enjoy the story of Eleanor Ellie Whitfield, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.